Viewer discretion is advised.
It's been about 3 days since we got back from our trip to the CWS and the nearby town we'd heard so much about. It took me a while to even process the fact that we were going back after what happened to me last time. But my granddad seemed keen, and I suppose that you could say that I needed some kind of closure. After all the research, hassling, and phone calls we'd made, it seemed like we had no other choice but to investigate further. If only I could have known the story we were digging deeper into, I would never have dreamt of getting involved. We set off on Monday morning and decided to head straight on to the town, having no stops whatsoever. It was just approaching midday as we drove silently past the CWS. Remembering what happened to me and knowing that we would be back on the ship soon enough gave me the worst feeling in my stomach. The supposed nearby town was actually a fair distance away from where the CWS was docked. It took us almost another half an hour to witness the welcome sign, but we eventually made it. Nearing the town, and passing by the mounds of unkempt greenery and land, we expected it to be an old, desolate fishing town with few people inhabiting it. After all, the entire area we had passed up to now was horribly mistreated. Yet, we noticed as we were nearing the area that what we could see up ahead was beautiful. We kept on driving until we reached a small bridge that took us over into the town. And what a town it was! It was very well kept and looked as if it got a good bit of business for a seemingly hidden little village. There were rows of shops on either side of us, a small B&B, another harbor that held minuscule fishing boats, and a few rows of houses further back that were hidden behind the shops. I remember looking over at the fishing boats for a moment, then turning my head to the north to look at the CWS. I felt so small. After we had gotten over the shock of how nice the town was, we decided it would be wise to start looking for information immediately. We wandered the streets, trying to find somewhere that we thought might be useful. And that's when I spotted it. In the midst of all the bustling shops, there was a small, dark sweet shop in the far corner of my vision that caught my eye. I figured that maybe the person who owned the shop would know a thing or two about the CWS or the captain, so we headed on over. At first glance, anybody would assume that the shop was shut. Nobody was going in, and it looked as if it hadn't been in business for years. But as we approached the door, the sign told us otherwise. As we went inside, we were greeted by a friendly old man who looked too frail to even be out of his own house. He gawked at us awkwardly, shaking with every breath, until my granddad finally decided to ask him a few questions. The first of which was, "Do you know anything about the ship docked a few miles away? The CWS?" A look of anger filled his face.
No,
he replied. My granddad asked him another question, and he gave us the same answer again. He must have said no at least 5 times, each time getting quicker and louder, until my granddad couldn't even finish his sentence. We knew that he knew something, so we kept pushing the questions, until he took a deep breath and wrote something down.
"Take this and go see his sister. She might talk to you. Now leave."
He then hurried us out of the door and back onto the street. After a quick bite to eat, we set off to find the house written down so that we could talk to the captain's sister. We arrived at a huge house on the other side of the village and knocked on the thick wooden door. A thin, old woman opened up with a smile on her face. She said hello and happily invited us inside. It seemed she hadn't had company in a long time. Her eyes were glazed over, almost as if she wasn't completely with us. Once inside, I cut to the chase. There was no need to be making small talk. She was either going to talk to us, or she wasn't. I immediately asked, "Would you be willing to talk to us about your brother?" And to my surprise, she told me she'd love to. I let my granddad ask the questions, as he knew more about the captain, the ship, the history. He had all the knowledge. So I sat back and wrote down everything that was said in the interview. S.A. is my granddad and E.B. is the captain's sister.
So, the captain of the CWS, he was your brother?
His name was DB, and yes, he was a wonderful brother too. Very caring when we were children. Of course, I didn't get to see much of him when we got older. Being the captain of a ship is very hard work.
So, when was the last time you saw DB?
Oh, must be 53 years ago now. He died, sadly. I remember it vividly. 9th September, 1965.
How did you find out about his death?
It had been reported that the CWS had been found completely abandoned off the coast of Argentina. No bodies, no missing lifeboats, nothing. My brother being the captain, and both of our parents being dead, I received the call of his death. It was a very sad day for me. He just never knew how to stop it.
Stop what?
The thing that got rid of them all. They should have just stayed in their rooms. It would have been better for everyone. He wouldn't have felt so guilty, I'd imagine. It wasn't his fault, though.
Stop what? What are you talking about?
I know about it, you know. He told me everything. It was on Christmas '95 that he came back home to visit us. He was acting weird the whole time, twitching and mumbling to himself. He wouldn't talk to any of us properly all day, until he took me off to one side before he was leaving. He told me that he'd found something, and that it had followed him from the sea to the ship, to the land. It just wouldn't leave him alone. I felt so sorry for him. He mentioned something about thinking that it was all just a fisherman's tale, so he had to find out. Then he kissed me on the cheek and left in a hurry. Later on, when I went upstairs, I'd seen that he had left me his journal on my bed. There was a lot of scribblings in there that hurt me to read.
Did he tell you anything else? Was that definitely the last time you saw him?
That was the last time. I'll always remember it. The fear in his voice when he told me everything that had happened will stay with me until I die. Like I said, he seemed anxious all night, as if he had been followed. He went upstairs to use the toilet at one point, and everyone downstairs could hear him shriek. He came down shaking and awkwardly laughing, telling us that he thought he saw something in the mirror. Oh, it must have scared him terribly, because he was very loud.
Do you still have the journal? Can we look at it?
Take it. It's upstairs in a box under my bed. I've only ever read it twice. I don't like the memories.
After that, we thanked EB and left with the journal. By the time we got out of the house, it was beginning to get dark, so we decided to stay at the B&B for the night and revisit the CWS in the morning. As we were strolling down the street, heading for the B&B, I could have sworn I heard that same scream I heard on the ship. It echoed in the distance, but it shook me to the bone. That night, I read through the journal while my granddad got his rest. It was interesting, chilling, disturbing, sad, confusing. As a child, I had never considered the possibility of the captain to be an innocent man, but I did now. I'll update you again as soon as possible with what I found out in the journal, as well as giving you the details of my latest experience on the CWS. I never thought that it could get any worse, but it did.